Can a man survive 5 days in an airport waiting for a bride who never arrived, and somehow walk away with a family he never expected? The departure hall of Westbridge International was glowing that evening, all glass walls and golden lights reflecting off polished floors. People hurried past with rolling suitcases, laughter echoing, reunions unfolding in tight embraces. And in the middle of it all stood Adrian Vale. His suit was perfectly pressed. His tie was a deep shade of blue his fiancée once said made his eyes look softer. In his trembling hands he held a bouquet of white lilies. He kept checking the arrivals board. Flight 702 landed. He smiled to himself. She would appear any second now. Running toward him, laughing, apologizing for the delay. Minutes passed, then an hour. Passengers from the flight streamed out in waves. Families reunited. Business partners shook hands. Children ran into open arms, but not her. Adrian adjusted his collar. Perhaps she was in the restroom. Perhaps she had been stopped at security. He pulled out his phone. No messages. He called straight to voicemail. A thin line formed between his brows. He tried again and again. Each call rang like a countdown to something he didn't want to name. Midnight crept in. Airport staff began glancing at him with polite concern. The bouquet started to wilt slightly at the edges. By 2 a.m., the truth pressed against his chest like a stone. She wasn't coming. Still, he didn't leave. Because sometimes the heart refuses to accept what the mind already knows. He told himself she would arrive on the morning flight. Maybe she missed the connection. Maybe something had happened. Love doesn't disappear in a day, does it? He sat down on one of the metal chairs, staring at the entrance doors as if he could summon her through sheer will. And as the first sunrise painted the glass walls in pale orange, Adrian whispered to himself, "She'll come." But deep inside, something fragile had already begun to crack. Before we go any further, if stories of heartbreak, resilience, and unexpected miracles move you, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because what happened next, no one could have imagined. And the worst part, day one was only the beginning. By the second day, the lilies had started to droop. Adrian noticed it when a petal slipped from the bouquet and landed quietly on the airport floor. He stared at it for a long moment before bending down to pick it up, as if saving that single petal might somehow save everything else. He hadn't slept. Every time his eyes closed, he imagined her walking through the sliding doors, scanning the crowd, searching for him. So he forced himself to stay awake. What if she arrived and he wasn't there? He checked his phone again. No calls, no messages. Her social media was silent. Her last text from 3 days ago still glowed on his screen. "See you soon. I can't wait to start forever, forever." The word now felt like a cruel joke echoing in his ears. He walked to the airline counter, trying to keep his voice steady as he asked if there had been any issues with Flight 702. The woman behind the desk typed politely, glanced at her screen, and gave him a small, apologetic smile. "All passengers arrived safely, sir, safely." The word should have brought relief. Instead, it twisted inside him. He thanked her and stepped away, his polished shoes dragging slightly now. The airport, once vibrant and alive, began to feel cold, mechanical, endless. He bought a coffee he didn't drink. He sat, he stood, he paced. Every time the doors opened with that familiar whoosh, his heart leapt into his throat. Every time it fell. By evening, doubt began whispering louder. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she found someone better. Maybe she realized he wasn't enough. He clenched his jaw, fighting the sting rising behind his eyes. Adrian Vale was not a man who broke easily. He had built a company from nothing. He had faced bankruptcy, betrayal in business, sleepless nights, But this was different. This wasn't about money or pride. This was about love. He replayed their last conversation at least 100 times, her laughter, her promises. The way she said his name like it meant something. Had he missed a sign? Had there been a crack in her voice he ignored? By midnight of the second day, exhaustion began to blur his thoughts. The airport lights felt harsher, the announcements louder. The laughter of strangers sharper. And yet he stayed, because walking away would mean admitting she wasn't coming, and he wasn't ready for that. But somewhere in the quiet hum of the terminal, a new question began forming in his heart. If she doesn't come tomorrow, what will be left of me? He didn't know that tomorrow would not just bring answers. It would bring something far more unexpected. Day 3 arrived without mercy. Adrian woke with a stiff neck, his body curled awkwardly across two cold metal seats. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then the bright terminal lights burned into his eyes and the truth returned like a wave crashing over him. She still hadn't called. He sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair. His reflection in the darkened window startled him. The confident groom from 2 days ago was gone. In his place stood a man with tired eyes and a smile that no longer knew how to form. He walked to the restroom, splashed water on his face, and stared at himself in the mirror. "Pull yourself together," he muttered. But his voice sounded hollow. Back in the terminal, life continued as if nothing had happened. Families reunited. Couples argued softly about luggage. A little girl tugged at her father's sleeve, begging for a chocolate bar. The normalcy of it all felt almost cruel. Adrian's phone buzzed suddenly. His heart slammed against his ribs. He grabbed it so fast it nearly slipped from his hands. Unknown number. He answered immediately. "Hello," silence. Then the line disconnected. He stared at the screen, breathing unevenly. He tried calling back. The number was unreachable. A bitter laugh escaped his lips before he could stop it. Was this some kind of punishment? He sat back down, hands trembling slightly. For the first time, anger began to replace confusion. How could she do this? If she didn't want to marry him, she could have said so. If she had doubts, they could have talked. But this vanishing act, it felt like erasing him entirely. He thought of the guests who had already flown to the wedding venue, the decorations, the music booked months in advance. The vows he had practiced quietly at night when no one was watching. He had imagined their future in careful detail, a home filled with laughter, Sunday mornings with coffee and soft sunlight, arguments that ended in apologies and kisses. Now all of it felt like smoke slipping through his fingers. By late afternoon, something inside him began to collapse, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. He walked to the glass wall overlooking the runway. Planes took off one after another, lifting into the sky with purpose. Everyone was going somewhere, everyone except him. He pressed his palm against the cool glass and whispered, almost pleading, "Why?" The answer never came. But someone had been watching him from a distance. Small, silent, curious. And by the time day 4 began, that quiet observer would step into his life in a way he never saw coming. Day 4 did not begin with hope. It began with heaviness. Adrian no longer checked the arrivals board every 5 minutes. He no longer stood when the sliding doors opened. Something inside him had grown tired of being disappointed. He had moved from the bright central hall to a quieter corner near gate 18 where fewer people passed. The bouquet of lilies now rested in a trash bin nearby. He had thrown them away that morning, his fingers lingering on the stems before letting go. It felt like burying something. He hadn't eaten properly in days. A half sandwich sat untouched beside him. His suit jacket was folded next to his bag, sleeves slightly wrinkled. The version of him that had arrived here, hopeful, polished, in love, felt like a stranger now. He leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. Memories came uninvited. Her laughter when he first proposed. The way she held his hand and said, "You'll never be alone again." The words echoed painfully, "Never be alone again." A soft sound pulled him from his thoughts. A small pair of sneakers stopped directly in front of him. Adrian opened his eyes slowly. A little boy stood there, no older than 5, messy dark hair, oversized hoodie, a tiny backpack hanging off one shoulder. His eyes were wide, studying Adrian with fearless curiosity. Adrian blinked, confused. "Are you lost, kid?" The boy didn't answer right away. He tilted his head slightly, as if examining something broken but interesting. Then he asked in the simplest, most innocent voice imaginable, "Why are you sad?" The question struck harder than any accusation could have. Adrian forced a faint smile. "I'm not." The boy frowned, clearly unconvinced. "You look like my dad did," he said softly. Something tightened in Adrian's chest. "And how did your dad look?" The boy shrugged, then looked down at his shoes. "Before he left." The words hung in the air between them. Adrian didn't know what to say. He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't prepared for a child to see straight through him when grown adults had walked past without noticing anything at all. He cleared his throat gently. "Where's your mom?" The boy looked back up at him. "I don't have one." The simplicity of the answer stole the breath from Adrian's lungs, and then the boy stepped closer, closer than strangers should. And what he said next would change everything. But Adrian wasn't ready for it, not yet. The boy didn't look afraid. That was the first thing Adrian noticed. Most children were taught not to approach strangers. But this little one stood there as if something invisible connected them, as if sadness had its own language and they both spoke it fluently. Adrian shifted in his seat. "Where's your father?" he asked gently. The boy hesitated. His fingers tightened around the strap of his tiny backpack. "He said he'd be right back," he answered quietly. A sharp chill ran through Adrian's spine. "How long ago?" The boy looked toward the large digital clock hanging above the gate. "A lot of cartoons ago." Adrian swallowed hard. He scanned the terminal instinctively. Parents rushing by, announcements echoing overhead, no one searching frantically, no one calling a child's name. "What's your name?" Adrian asked, his voice softer now. "Ethan." The name settled into his heart without permission. "I'm Adrian." Ethan nodded seriously, as if committing it to memory. There was something painfully composed about the child. No tears, no panic, just quiet waiting, waiting. Adrian felt something twist inside him. He knew that posture, that stillness, that fragile hope that someone would return. "Did your dad say where he was going?" Adrian pressed carefully. "He said he needed to fix something," Ethan replied. "He said I'm brave." The word brave sounded far too heavy for someone so small. Adrian exhaled slowly. His own heartbreak suddenly felt complicated, bigger yet smaller at the same time. 5 days ago, he had been waiting for a woman who promised forever. Now this boy was waiting for a father who might never come back. Ethan shifted closer and sat down beside him without asking. Their shoulders almost touched. After a few quiet seconds, the boy looked up again. "Are you waiting too?" Adrian's throat tightened. He nodded once. "She didn't come," he said, surprising himself with the honesty. Ethan studied his face carefully, as if trying to understand grown-up pain. Then he asked something that made Adrian's breath catch. "Did she forget you?" Adrian couldn't answer, because maybe she had. Silence wrapped around them, not awkward, not heavy, just shared. Two people sitting in the middle of a crowded airport, both pretending not to be abandoned. And then Ethan leaned forward slightly, his small voice lowering as if he were about to share a secret. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian didn't know it yet, but this question would tear open his heart in ways he never expected. Adrian forced a small nod. Go ahead. Ethan looked at him with an intensity no child should carry. His fingers fidgeted with the zipper of his backpack. For a moment, it seemed like he might change his mind. Then he asked softly, carefully, will you be my mom? The words didn't make sense at first. Adrian blinked. What? Ethan rushed to explain, his voice trembling now. Not really a mom, but someone who stays, moms stay. The innocence in his logic shattered something deep inside Adrian's chest. Moms don't leave, Ethan added quickly. My friend Noah has two moms, they both stay. Adrian felt his vision blur slightly. I don't think I can be your mom, he said gently, trying to smile. I'm not very good at that job, Ethan didn't laugh. I don't care, he replied. You look kind. No one had called Adrian that in a very long time. In business meetings, he was sharp, decisive, ruthless when necessary. Even in love, he had been the strong one, the provider, the planner, but kind, he swallowed hard. Why me? Adrian asked, barely above a whisper. Ethan looked at him like the answer was obvious. Because you didn't leave. The simplicity of it crushed him. 5 days of humiliation, 5 days of heartbreak, 5 days of refusing to walk away. To this little boy, it meant something entirely different. It meant loyalty. It meant safety. Adrian's chest rose unevenly. He turned slightly, hiding the moisture gathering in his eyes. He wasn't prepared for this. He had come here to begin a marriage, a honeymoon, a carefully mapped future. He had not come here to become someone's anchor, but Ethan didn't move away. He simply waited, waiting again, always waiting. Adrian looked around the terminal, finally noticing something he had ignored before. No frantic father. No security alert, no announcements calling Ethan's name. A cold realization began creeping in. What if the boy hadn't just been delayed? What if he had been left? Adrian's heart pounded. Because if that was true, then this wasn't just a random encounter. This was something much bigger. And for the first time in 5 days, Adrian wasn't thinking about the woman who didn't come. He was thinking about the child who might have been forgotten, and what he chose to do next would change both of their lives forever. Adrian stood up slowly. Ethan, he said gently, kneeling so they were eye level. How about we go talk to airport security just to make sure your dad is okay? Ethan's fingers tightened around his backpack strap again. He said to stay here, the boy whispered. The words pierced through Adrian's chest. He remembered telling himself the same thing on day one. Stay here, she'll come back. Waiting can feel like loyalty, but sometimes it's just abandonment dressed up as hope. I know, Adrian said softly, and you did exactly what he asked. You were brave. Ethan's lip trembled slightly at that. It was the first crack in his composure. But sometimes, Adrian continued, being brave also means asking for help. For a second, Ethan looked torn between obedience and fear. Then he nodded. They walked together toward the information desk. Ethan's small hand hovered near Adrian's sleeve, not quite holding it, but close enough to show he wanted to. Adrian gave the boy's hand a gentle squeeze. At the security counter, Adrian explained the situation calmly. The officer's expression shifted from polite interest to serious concern as details unfolded. How long has the child been alone? The officer asked. At least 4 hours, Adrian replied. Ethan shook his head. More cartoons than that. The officer crouched down to Ethan's level. What's your dad's name, buddy? Ethan answered quietly. Daniel. They checked records, no recent reports. No missing person claims. No delayed passenger looking for a child. Adrian felt a wave of anger rise inside him. How could someone leave a child like this? An announcement was made over the intercom asking Daniel to report to the security desk. They waited 5 minutes, 10, 30, nothing. Ethan's brave little shoulders began to sag. Maybe he's still fixing it, he murmured. Adrian's jaw tightened. His heart broke all over again, but this time not for himself. For the first time in days, his pain felt secondary. Security gently escorted Ethan to a private office while they contacted child services. Adrian followed without hesitation. "You can't come in," an officer said kindly. "We'll take care of him." Ethan turned suddenly, panic flashing across his face. "Are you leaving too?" The question froze Adrian where he stood. 5 days ago, he had been the one asking that question in his heart. Now it was being handed back to him. He knelt again, placing both hands gently on Ethan's shoulders. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time since she didn't show up, Adrian meant it. But he had no idea what promising that would truly require. The small office felt colder than the rest of the airport. Fluorescent lights hummed above them as Ethan sat in a plastic chair, feet dangling slightly above the floor. Adrian remained close, refusing to take the seat offered across the room. Distance suddenly felt dangerous. A social worker arrived within the hour, calm voice, gentle eyes, a folder tucked under her arm. She knelt in front of Ethan and asked careful questions. His full name, his father's full name, where they lived. Each answer came softly, like he was afraid the truth might break something fragile in the air. Adrian listened. Daniel Mercer. Apartment lease expired 2 weeks ago. No listed emergency contact. The social worker's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. She stepped outside briefly to make calls. The waiting stretched on. Ethan leaned closer to Adrian, resting his small head lightly against his arm. The contact was hesitant at first, then trusting. Adrian didn't move. Something inside him, something that had been shattered days ago, began to rearrange itself quietly. Not healed, just rearranged. The social worker returned, her face more serious now. "We've checked security footage," she said gently. His father left the airport shortly after arriving. "Alone," the words landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Adrian felt Ethan's fingers clutch his sleeve tighter. "He'll come back," Ethan whispered automatically, as if repeating a spell he needed to believe. Adrian closed his eyes for a second. He remembered standing in this same building, whispering the same thing. "She'll come back, but some people don't." The social worker continued carefully. "We've contacted local authorities. There's no immediate family listed. Until we sort this out, Ethan will need temporary placement." Temporary, the word echoed loudly. Ethan's breathing became uneven. His brave mask was finally cracking. Tears welled up but didn't fall yet. He looked up at Adrian, eyes wide and searching. "You said you're not going anywhere." Adrian's chest tightened so fiercely it almost hurt. He hadn't planned for this. He hadn't prepared for this. His life was meticulously structured: board meetings, investment calls, wedding plans that no longer existed. He had not planned for fatherhood, but life had not gone according to plan anyway. The social worker glanced between them. "Are you a relative?" Adrian hesitated. 5 days ago he had been a groom. Today he didn't know what he was. He looked down at Ethan, small hands gripping his sleeve, trusting, terrified, alone. And something inside Adrian made a decision before his mind could argue. "No," he said slowly, "but I don't think he should be alone tonight." The room went silent, because sometimes family isn't about blood. Sometimes it begins in an airport when two abandoned hearts choose not to let go. But stepping forward would mean stepping into something permanent. And Adrian was about to find out just how permanent it could become. The silence in the room felt heavier than anything Adrian had carried in his life. The social worker studied him carefully. Sir, this isn't a simple decision. Temporary guardianship requires paperwork, background checks, evaluation. I understand, Adrian replied. And he did. He had signed contracts worth millions without blinking. But this felt different. This wasn't ink on paper. This was a child's life. Ethan's fingers were still wrapped tightly in his sleeve as if letting go might cause him to disappear. Will I have to sleep here? Ethan asked quietly. The question sliced through Adrian's hesitation. No, Adrian said firmly before anyone else could answer. The social worker raised a brow slightly. You're willing to take responsibility, Adrian exhaled slowly. 5 days ago, he had been ready to promise forever to someone who didn't show up. Now forever was staring at him with tear-filled eyes. Yes, he said. The word settled into the room like something sacred. Paperwork began, questions followed, his full name, his address, his occupation. When he mentioned he owned Vale Industries, the social worker looked mildly surprised. It didn't matter to him, titles meant nothing here. Ethan didn't care about his bank account. He only cared that someone stayed. Hours passed as arrangements were made. Emergency temporary placement under supervision, follow-up investigation. Legal processes ahead, but for tonight, Ethan would not go to a shelter. When they finally stepped out of the office, the airport felt different. Not colder, not louder, just different. Adrian carried Ethan's tiny backpack in one hand. With the other, he held Ethan's small fingers carefully, gently, as if holding something priceless. Are you still sad? Ethan asked as they walked toward the parking lot. Adrian paused. He thought about the woman who never came. About the 5 days of humiliation, about the vows that would never be spoken. He looked down at the child beside him. I don't think I am, he admitted quietly. Ethan nodded like that made perfect sense. Outside, the night air felt fresh against Adrian's face. For 5 days, he had been waiting for someone to arrive. Tonight, he was leaving with someone instead. But he knew this was only the beginning, because tomorrow, reality would set in. Court dates, questions, complications, and perhaps the possibility that Ethan's father might return. And if that happened, would Adrian be strong enough to let him go? The drive home was quiet. Ethan sat in the passenger seat of Adrian's car, staring out the window at the city lights passing by. He didn't ask where they were going. He didn't ask how long he would stay. He simply trusted. That trust felt heavier than anything Adrian had ever carried. When they arrived at Adrian's penthouse, Ethan looked up at the tall building with wide eyes. Do you live in the clouds? He asked softly. A faint smile touched Adrian's lips. Something like that. Inside, the apartment felt different than it ever had before. It had always been sleek, modern, perfectly arranged, glass tables, minimal furniture, silence that once felt peaceful. Tonight it felt empty. Ethan stepped in cautiously, removing his small sneakers without being told. You can keep them on, Adrian said gently. My dad says shoes make homes dirty, Ethan replied automatically. The mention of his father hung in the air again. Adrian crouched slightly. You can call me Adrian, he said. Ethan hesitated. Okay, Adrian. It sounded small but sincere. Adrian ordered food, something simple. Ethan ate quietly at first, then with growing hunger. Each bite seemed to remind Adrian just how long the boy had probably gone without proper care. After dinner, Adrian improvised a bed on the large couch with soft blankets. You can take the bed, Adrian offered. Ethan shook his head firmly. You need it, you look more tired. That nearly broke him. Later, as the city lights dimmed and silence filled the room, Ethan's voice floated softly through the darkness. Adrian, yes, if my dad comes back, will you still stay? The question froze him. He walked over and sat beside the couch, brushing a hand gently through Ethan's messy hair. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'll still stay." Ethan nodded, comforted, and within minutes his breathing slowed into sleep. Adrian remained there long after. 5 days ago he had begged the universe not to take someone from him. Now he found himself begging for the strength not to lose someone else. His phone buzzed suddenly in the quiet, unknown number. His heart skipped. Slowly he answered. "Hello," a male voice responded. "This is Daniel Mercer." Adrian's blood ran cold because the man who left was finally calling back. Adrian's grip tightened around the phone. There was a faint hum of traffic on the other end of the line, a man breathing unevenly. "This is Daniel Mercer," the voice repeated, lower this time. "I was told my son is with you." Adrian glanced at Ethan, still asleep on the couch, his small hand curled around the edge of the blanket. "Yes," Adrian answered carefully. "He's safe." A long pause followed. "Thank you," Daniel said, though the word sounded strained, almost unfamiliar in his mouth. Adrian stood and walked toward the window, staring down at the city lights far below. "Why?" he asked quietly. Silence, then a heavy exhale. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." Another pause, longer this time. "I lost my job 2 months ago," Daniel began. "Bills piled up, eviction notice. I tried everything. I couldn't feed him properly anymore. I couldn't even look him in the eyes without feeling like a failure." His voice cracked slightly. "So you left him at an airport?" Adrian's tone sharpened despite himself. "I thought," Daniel struggled, "I thought someone would find him, someone better, someone who could give him more than I ever could." Adrian felt anger surge through him, hot and protective. "He waited," Adrian said. "He defended you. He believes you're coming back." The line went quiet. "I never meant to hurt him," Daniel whispered. I didn't know how to stay." The irony was almost unbearable. 5 days ago, Adrian had been the one left without explanation. Now he was standing in the place of the one who stayed. "Where are you?" Adrian asked. "About 20 minutes away," Daniel replied. "I couldn't go far." Adrian closed his eyes. Part of him wanted to hang up. Part of him wanted to tell this man he had no right, but another part, quieter, steadier, knew something else. This wasn't about replacing a father. This was about protecting a child. "You can come here," Adrian said finally, "but we talk first, away from him." Daniel agreed. When Adrian ended the call, he leaned his forehead briefly against the cool glass. He had just stepped into a role he never asked for, and now he might have to step back out of it. Behind him, Ethan stirred slightly in his sleep, and Adrian realized something that terrified him. He wasn't afraid of being abandoned anymore. He was afraid of becoming the one who leaves, and in less than 30 minutes, he would have to decide exactly who he was going to be. 27 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Not loud, not confident, just 3 hesitant taps that carried the weight of regret. Adrian stood still for a moment before opening it. Daniel Mercer looked nothing like the villain Adrian had imagined in his anger. He was thinner than expected, eyes hollow from sleepless nights, clothes worn but clean, a man held together by guilt and desperation. They stood facing each other in silence. "You look better than I thought you would," Daniel muttered awkwardly. Adrian didn't smile. "He doesn't." That hit. Daniel's eyes flickered toward the living room where Ethan slept peacefully on the couch. "He's safe?" Daniel asked again, softer now. "Yes." Daniel stepped inside slowly, as if unsure he deserved to. They moved to the kitchen area, speaking in hushed voices. "You thought abandoning him would give him a better life?" Adrian asked quietly. Daniel ran both hands through his hair. "I thought someone like you would find him. Someone like me, successful, stable, not drowning." Adrian felt the words settle heavily between them. You don't fix drowning by throwing away what keeps you afloat, Adrian replied. Daniel's shoulders sagged. I didn't know how to stay strong in front of him anymore, he admitted. Every time he smiled at me, I felt like I was lying, like I was promising a future I couldn't provide. Adrian looked toward the sleeping child again. He doesn't need perfect, Adrian said. He needs present. The silence that followed was not angry anymore. It was honest. Daniel's voice broke when he finally asked, "Does he hate me?" Adrian swallowed. No. He believes in you. That shattered whatever pride Daniel had left. His eyes filled, but he didn't wipe them. I came back, Daniel whispered, because walking away felt worse than failing. Adrian studied him carefully. 5 days ago, someone had walked away from him without a word. This man had at least returned. Then don't leave again, Adrian said. Daniel nodded quickly, emotion choking him. Just then, a small voice drifted from the living room. Dad, both men turned. Ethan stood there, hair messy from sleep, eyes wide and uncertain. Daniel dropped to his knees instantly. I'm here, he breathed. Ethan ran forward without hesitation. And as father and son held each other tightly in the middle of that quiet penthouse, Adrian felt something unexpected. Not loss, not jealousy, relief, because sometimes love isn't about keeping. It's about choosing not to repeat the same mistake. Ethan looked over his father's shoulder at Adrian. You stayed, he said softly. Adrian nodded. Yes, he answered, and this time he wasn't waiting for someone to arrive. He had already found what he needed, not a bride, but proof that even broken beginnings can lead to something whole.